Every firstborn child in this bloodline dies on their 7th birthday, no matter where they are, no matter what you do. That's not folklore. That's not a myth. That's a cold, documented truth spanning over 3 centuries. What if I told you there's a real family in England with a legacy so dark it has defied science, religion, distance, and time itself? This is not a creepypasta. This is not fiction. This is a generational nightmare, a ritualistic death pattern that has claimed dozens of children in identical positions at the same hour, under the same moonless sky. The Corbyns curse is one of the most terrifying true stories you've never heard, and it may be the most unexplained phenomenon in British history. From 1678 to 2024, it has never missed. No horror film could write this. Welcome to a case that could rewrite what we think we know about fate, bloodlines, and the limits of reality. Stay until the end, because the last documented death might just change everything. It was 2:58 a.m. on February 3, 2024, when the temperature inside a perfectly normal suburban home in Toronto dropped from 70 degrees Celsius to 48 degrees Celsius in just 30 seconds. Surveillance cameras froze. Every motion sensor went dark. And when the feed returned exactly 15 seconds later, 6-year-old Samuel Corbyns was no longer in his bed. He was on the floor, face down, arms outstretched, eyes wide open in a look of pure ancient terror. No trauma, no sounds, no signs of a break-in. Just death, silent, surgical, and familiar. What his parents didn't know, what no technology could prevent, was that the curse had evolved. It had stopped waiting. And now, for the first time in over 3 centuries, it had claimed a child before his 7th birthday. But this wasn't random. This was a pattern, a message, a collector cashing in. And what you're about to discover next will take us deep into the origin of one of history's most haunting bloodline horrors. What if your child was marked for death, and there was nothing in this world you could do to stop it? That's not a horror script. That's the real nightmare that unfolded in a quiet suburb of Toronto on February 3, 2024. At exactly 2:58 a.m., the thermostat in the Corbyns household registered a sudden, unexplained drop from 70 degrees Celsius to 48 degrees in less than 30 seconds. Multiple home sensors lost connection simultaneously. Infrared surveillance cameras glitched, freezing for exactly 15 seconds. When the footage came back online, 6-year-old Samuel Corbyns was no longer sleeping soundly in his bed. He was on the floor, face down, arms fully outstretched, his tiny fingers clawing at the wood as if reaching for something or someone that wasn't there. His eyes were wide open, frozen in an expression of unspeakable fear. No bruises, no injuries, no sounds, no intruder. Just a lifeless body in a posture eerily identical to dozens of others across centuries. He wasn't even 7 yet. He was 6 years and 8 months old. This wasn't a coincidence. This was precision. A signature. A message carved into time. And it was just the beginning. Because Samuel's death would unlock a chilling truth buried beneath 346 years of silence. And once you see what comes next, you'll understand why this curse can't be outrun. They changed their names, fled their homeland, buried every trace of their bloodline, yet death still found their son. Samuel Corbyns was never supposed to carry the name Corbyns. His birth certificate had a different surname. His parents, David and Emily, had taken every possible step to erase their connection to the Corbyns lineage. They left the UK before he was even born, settled in Canada under assumed identities, and never once spoke the name that history had cursed. Their home was fortified with every modern protection: biometric locks 24/7, infrared surveillance, motion-triggered lighting, smart thermostats linked to mobile alerts. Nothing was left to chance. They consulted geneticists, spiritual advisors, even fringe physicists. They raised Samuel in warmth, love, and complete ignorance of his ancestral legacy. No portraits, no heirlooms, no bedtime stories tied to the past. His 7th birthday was still 8 months away. But the entity didn't care. The curse didn't need a name, a map, or a confession. It needed only one thing: blood. And even across oceans, under layers of deception and data firewalls, it tracked him. With mechanical precision, it came not when they expected it, but when they least believed it could. Samuel wasn't forgotten. He was targeted. And in doing so, the curse made one thing clear: you can't hide from something that's written in your DNA. If there were no fingerprints, no struggle, no sound, then what exactly killed Samuel Corbyns? It wasn't disease. It wasn't suffocation. And it definitely wasn't coincidence. Because the posture in which his body was found, face down, arms stretched, wide eyes frozen in raw terror, has been seen before. Not once, not twice, but dozens of times, in different centuries, in different countries, in different generations, always the firstborn, always on or near their 7th birthday, and always at exactly 3:00 a.m. This isn't an isolated case. This is a blueprint of death repeated with ritualistic precision for over 346 years. And Samuel, tragically, is just the most recent chapter in a blood-soaked family record, known among occult historians as the Corbyns curse. A curse so old, so consistent, and so specific, that many researchers now believe it is the most well-documented unexplained death pattern in Western history. This raises one terrifying question: if no human hand committed this act, then what kind of ancient force claims children, not randomly but methodically? As we pull back the layers of time, we'll follow the terrifying trail of the Corbyns bloodline from its origin in 17th century England to its latest casualty in a modern Canadian bedroom. And what we uncover next will shatter any belief that this world is entirely ours. It all began with a man named Elias Corbyns, a merchant, a skeptic, and a thief of something that was never meant to leave sacred ground. In 1677, he returned from the East Indies with more than silks and spices. He brought home a black stone figurine carved with features that didn't match any known god, a child's body with the face of an ancient being. Locals warned him never remove it from the temple. But Elias didn't listen. He saw wealth, power, a relic. What he didn't see was a doorway, one that would stay open for centuries. And just 1 year later, when his firstborn son died, under terrifyingly identical conditions, the legacy began. What if this wasn't a curse born of punishment, but of contract? The deeper we look into Elias's journals, the more chilling the truth becomes. Because the figurine didn't just represent something, it contained it. And what came home with Elias didn't want gold. It wanted potential, innocence, and it wanted it again and again. As you'll see in the next case, nothing Elias tried could stop what had already been welcomed in. In 1677, Elias Corbyns returned to England, a wealthy man praised for his success, envied for his fortune, and completely unaware that he had just brought home the seed of a generational nightmare. Among the spices, silks, and rare manuscripts he acquired during his travels through the East Indies was one item never listed in any ledger, a small figurine carved from an impossibly dark stone, colder than metal and heavier than it should have been. The artifact depicted a childlike body with limbs too long, too smooth. Its face, however, was unmistakably ancient, weathered with wisdom no infant could possess. Local priests in the foothills north of Kolkata had warned him, "This is not a god, this is not a relic, this is containment." But Elias, ever the skeptic, dismissed their pleading as superstition. He believed in markets, not monsters. He packed the figurine and smuggled it home, treating it as a curiosity, unaware that its presence had unsealed something older than language. That decision would mark the beginning of one of history's most enduring paranormal phenomena. Because what Elias brought back didn't want to be admired. It wanted access. And it had just found a bloodline to feed on. On June 24th, 1678, Midsummer's Eve, a violent storm rolled across the Northumberland countryside as the Corbyns estate celebrated young Edmund's 7th birthday. Thunder cracked the sky open like bone. Candles flickered. Servants whispered that the air inside the manor felt heavier than the storm outside. Edmund Corbyns, firstborn son of Elias, had gone to bed early, exhausted from the day's festivities. But sometime around 3:00 a.m., his nurse awoke to a strange sound, not crying, not footsteps, but a conversation. Except only one voice could be heard, Edmund's whispering back and forth with something that never replied out loud. When she entered the boy's room, her scream brought the house to a halt. Edmund was lying on the floor, face down, arms fully outstretched as if reaching for something just out of view. His eyes were open, dilated, unblinking, etched with a fear no 7-year-old should ever know. There were no signs of illness, no marks, no struggle, just death, impossible and instant. The town physician called it heart failure, but even he admitted it looked wrong. It didn't feel like death had arrived. It felt like something had been collected, and Elias, still holding the figurine in his private study, would never be the same. because deep down he knew the storm had not come from the sky. By the time Elias Corbyns' second son Gideon approached his 7th birthday in 1685, the memory of Edmund's death had transformed from grief into obsession. Elias no longer dismissed the supernatural, he studied it, feverishly, in secret. He scoured texts on demonology, consulted with priests, and filled entire journals with symbols he believed could protect his family. As Gideon's 7th year neared, Elias transformed the boy's room into a fortress. Circles of blessed salt lined the floor. Iron talismans hung from every beam. A clergyman slept outside the door. Armed guards patrolled the halls. No one was allowed to speak the name Edmund. And yet on the morning after Gideon's birthday, the house was silent. No alarms, no screams. Just one dreadful realization: Gideon's bed was empty. When they opened the door, they found him in the exact same position as his brother, face down on the cold wooden floor, arms fully extended, eyes wide frozen in that now familiar look of sheer unnatural terror. No one had heard a thing. Not the guards, not the priest, not even the househounds who had mysteriously cowered in the cellar. It was as if reality itself had been bent around a moment where something entered, took what it wanted, and vanished. This was no tragic coincidence. This was a pattern beginning to take form, a ritual in motion, and from this point forward the Corbyns name would never again be spoken without fear. By the 18th century, the Corbyns curse was no longer whispered, it was feared. What began as isolated tragedy had now calcified into a horrifying pattern. Every firstborn child dead at 7, same hour, same posture, same terror-stricken face. It didn't matter the year, the continent, the precautions, the result was always the same. And yet, some members of the bloodline still believed they could outthink it, outpray it out, science it. They were wrong. Because what the Corbyns were about to learn in the coming generations wasn't just that the entity was unstoppable, it was methodical. And in the next case, one father's desperate attempt to outsmart it using reason and medicine would only make its precision even more terrifying. By the time the 1700s gave way to the 1800s, the Corbyns family had crossed a terrible threshold from mourning individual tragedies to tracking a mathematical certainty of death. Every single firstborn child, without exception, died on the night of their 7th birthday. The hour was always the same, 3:00 a.m. The position was always identical, face down, arms stretched out as if in surrender or silent plea, eyes frozen in pure wordless terror. And nothing, not location, faith, science, or silence, had any effect. They died in London manors, Scottish farmhouses, Swiss boarding schools, and even across the Atlantic in American towns no one connected to the Corbyns by name. But it didn't matter. The entity always knew who they were. It never missed. It never arrived early. It never came late. It came with clockwork precision, 7 years to the night. For the Corbyns family, joy turned to dread the moment a child was born. Baby showers felt like countdowns. Birthday candles felt like omens. And in every household tied to the bloodline, there was one shared fear that couldn't be said aloud: who's next? But in the next case, one father would dare to confront the curse head-on with the full force of 18th century science. And the result would shake his sanity to the core. In 1942, as German bombs rained down on London, families sought safety underground, huddled together in cramped makeshift shelters carved into the city's foundations. One of them was the Corbyns. Their firstborn Thomas had just turned 7. With air raid sirens blaring and dozens packed tightly into the dim, flickering corridors of the shelter, his parents believed, just for one night, that maybe the war was the greater danger. But they were wrong. Somewhere between 2:45 and 3:00 a.m. in a room packed wall to wall with frightened civilians, Thomas vanished from his cot without a single scream, sound, or stir. Moments later, a soldier found him several feet away, face down on the cold concrete, arms outstretched, eyes open, the exact same posture even beneath the earth. No one had seen him move. No one had felt him pass. He had been taken without permission, without witness, without a trace. And that's when the Corbyns curse became undeniable. Not even a world at war could drown it out. It was beyond time, beyond geography, beyond logic. The entity didn't need silence or privacy. It didn't need to be summoned. It arrived on schedule. always. And in the next documented case, even medically induced unconsciousness couldn't protect a child from being claimed. In 1967, Professor Alaric Corbyn, an esteemed anthropologist at Cambridge, set out to break the curse using logic, medicine, and reason. He had spent years studying death rituals across cultures, convinced that the Corbyn phenomenon was not supernatural, but a powerful form of psychosomatic imprinting, a death expectation passed down through fear, memory, and myth. So when his son Evan approached his 7th birthday, Alaric designed an experiment. Evan was admitted to a private hospital, placed under 24-hour medical surveillance, and sedated into a deep, medically induced coma. He was connected to the most advanced monitoring equipment available in the UK. Heart rate, brain activity, temperature, all tracked in real time. The room was sealed. Cameras rolled without pause, and 2 doctors remained on standby all night. And still, at exactly 3:03 a.m., Evan's eyes opened. His body did not move, but his mouth began to whisper, not in English, not in any language the staff recognized. Just 42 seconds later, all monitors flatlined. The autopsy found no cause of death. The footage confirmed he never left the bed. The entity didn't need consciousness. It didn't need fear. It needed only presence. 3 days later, Alaric Corbyn ended his life in his study. His final note contained just 3 words scrawled in frantic ink across a torn page. It is real. And from that moment on, the Corbyn family stopped questioning if the curse existed and began asking what it truly was. By the end of the 20th century, the Corbyn curse had transformed from whispered legend into one of the most disturbing data-backed paranormal mysteries ever recorded. Decades of death records, medical reports, autopsy notes, and video surveillance all pointed to one inescapable conclusion. This was not coincidence, not myth, but a system, a ritual executed with surgical precision across centuries. Desperate for answers, the surviving descendants did what no generation before them had dared. They gathered. And what they uncovered at that meeting would finally peel back the veil on where the curse began, and what might be feeding it. Because hidden in ancient journals and buried temple ruins, they would find something far older than a family name. Something that doesn't just want children, it wants what lives inside them. And the next person to face it wasn't a scientist, but a woman who had already lost everything. In the autumn of 1998, a letter marked with a broken wax seal arrived in 12 countries across 3 continents, each addressed to someone who had once carried the name Corbyn. Some had changed it. Others had buried it. But the blood remained, and so for the first time in recorded history, the surviving descendants of the Corbyn bloodline gathered in one place, the long-abandoned ancestral manor in Northumberland. They were doctors, historians, teachers, architects, rational minds, logical thinkers. But they had all lost a child, a sibling, a cousin, and none of them could explain why. What began as a family council quickly shifted into something else, a forensic investigation into a generational horror. They brought journals, medical records, police files, and decades of unspoken grief. And what they discovered when all the patterns were placed side by side was something that shattered every belief they once held about reality, faith, and death itself. This wasn't madness. It wasn't myth. It was a system, a harvest, a debt. And one woman at the table had already begun to trace its origins to a place no Corbyn had dared return to until now. Clara Devereux once, Clara Corbyn, before she legally erased the name, had spent 3 decades chasing shadows through ancient texts and forgotten dialects. But in 1974, she did what no one else in her family had ever dared. She returned to the source. Deep in the foothills north of Kolkata, guided by weathered maps and whispered directions, she found the ruins of a forgotten temple, partially swallowed by jungle and time. The carvings were barely legible, but what she learned there reframed everything. The entity wasn't demonic in the Western sense. It wasn't malevolent by nature. It was older than worship, older than gods, referred to in translated fragments as the collector of potential. It didn't feed on flesh. It fed on unrealized futures, the raw, infinite potential of a child on the brink of selfhood. And age 7 in dozens of ancient cosmologies was the moment the soul solidified. Clara realized the figurine Elias brought home wasn't a relic. It was a vessel, a breach point, a signal flare. and what crossed through hadn't stopped watching their bloodline since. What she uncovered next would explain why even distance denial and deception couldn't stop the ritual from claiming what it was owed. What Elias Corbin believed to be an exotic souvenir, a black stone figurine with the body of a child, and the face of something impossibly old, was never meant to leave sacred soil. But when he smuggled it into England in 1677, he didn't just carry it across continents, he carried it across thresholds. That figurine, Clara later confirmed, was not symbolic. It was functional, a vessel designed to contain, restrain, and bind a predatory consciousness older than recorded time. In removing it from its ritual protections and sacred resting place, Elias didn't just break a rule, he broke a seal. And worse, he brought it into the heart of his own bloodline. From that moment forward, the entity didn't need temples or worshippers. It had something far more permanent, a genetic tether, a living conduit passed down from parent to child. Elias unknowingly anchored the collector to his descendants, allowing it to manifest not with fire or violence, but with precision. Every firstborn wasn't cursed, they were claimed. Not because of who they were, but because of who Elias had made them. And now, hundreds of years later, the pattern wasn't weakening. It was evolving. Inside the ruined temple, Clara found what she described in her journals as a wall of prophecy, etched not with words, but with images so precise they froze her blood. Along one of the inner sanctum's stone panels, eroded by centuries of wind and moss, were carvings of children, small, fragile bodies lying face down, arms outstretched exactly like Edmund Gideon Catherine Thomas. All of them. Surrounding each child were recurring celestial symbols, crescent moons, clusters of stars, and one symbol that matched the astronomical alignment of a new moon. Clara photographed every inch, and with help from symbologists and astronomers confirmed what she had already feared: the carvings weren't just decorative. They were instructions. The collector didn't act randomly. It followed a cosmic rhythm, harvesting during specific lunar phases when potential was ripe. And the terrifying realization was this: the posture of the dead was not a reaction to fear, it was part of the ritual. A position of offering, a form of surrender. And worse still, it had been happening long before Elias ever crossed paths with the figurine. He didn't awaken the curse. He inherited it, but he gave it names to follow, blood to track, a family to harvest. In 1998, armed with everything they had uncovered from Elias's journals to Clara's temple findings, the Corbin descendants performed a ritual they believed might sever the bloodline's link to the collector. Designed by Clara herself, the rite combined protective symbols from 6 ancient traditions, timed precisely to the peak of a new moon. It lasted from sunset to sunrise, performed in the crumbling halls of Corbin Manor, under total silence. And for a moment, it worked. 2 children passed their 7th birthdays in 1999 and 2000 with no incident. Hope returned. Families exhaled. But on October 14, 2003, Emily Corbin, age 7, was found face down on her bedroom floor, arms stretched wide, eyes frozen in familiar terror. Her parents had followed every instruction. Her room had been sealed, her sleep monitored, her bloodline believed clean. But the curse had never truly left it, had only watched, waited, adapted. And with Emily's death, one unbearable truth became clear. This entity doesn't follow rules, it rewrites them. The ritual hadn't banished it. It had only reminded it who still owed a debt. And as we enter the modern era, the entity isn't slowing down. It's evolving. The 21st century was supposed to bring answers: technology, science, global connectivity. But for the Corbin bloodline, it brought something far more terrifying: evidence. Cold, clinical, undeniable footage and biometric data now confirmed what generations had only feared: the collector was real, and it was getting smarter. And in its latest documented cases, it began to bend the rules in ways no one predicted. What happened next would challenge everything we believe about fate consciousness and whether any child is ever truly safe. In the age of data and diagnostics, the Corbin curse was no longer just a chilling legacy. It became a scientific anomaly. EEG scans of Corbin children approaching their 7th birthday began to show unusual brainwave patterns during deep sleep, patterns consistent with high-level linguistic activity, as if they were conversing with something. But these weren't dreams. They were dialogues. Several children in the final days before their deaths began sketching the same figure, a small boy or girl with an expressionless face and eyes that looked impossibly old, eyes that didn't belong to a child. These children had no contact with each other, lived in different countries, spoke different languages, and yet the drawings were nearly identical. In one case, infrared cameras captured a shadow that moved against the flow of light drifting across the child's room, just seconds before the equipment cut out. Experts analyzed the footage. No source, no explanation, no tampering. Just a dark shape that wasn't supposed to exist. The evidence was mounting not just in myth, but in modern memory. And the closer scientists looked, the clearer it became this wasn't superstition. It was strategy. And the collector was watching still. On the night of his 7th birthday in 2017, Jack Corbyns' room became the epicenter of one of the most chilling paranormal recordings ever captured. Monitored by infrared cameras and temperature sensors, the footage shows the room temperature dropping steadily from 70-degree air to a bone-chilling 45-degree air starting at midnight. At precisely 2:58 a.m., a shadow unexplained and defying physics emerged in the corner, moving independently of any light source. Suddenly, Jack sat upright in bed, lips moving silently, as if speaking a language no human should know. Exactly at 3:00 a.m., all electronic devices in the room experienced a 15-second blackout. When the cameras returned, Jack was lying face down on the floor, arms outstretched, already lifeless. No visible trauma, no sounds. Just that same expression of ancient terror etched on his face. Experts who analyzed the footage were left baffled. This was no ghost story. It was hard evidence of a presence that manipulated reality itself, leaving a haunting question. How do you fight something that can bend time, space, and life? In 2022, the Corbyns family tried one last desperate experiment with twins, Lily and Michael Winters. To outsmart the curse, they deliberately falsified birth records, listing Michael as the firstborn, hoping to confuse the entity that claimed the firstborn's potential. Both children grew up believing Michael was older. The family sealed rooms with protective rituals, installed advanced monitoring systems, and gathered experts from around the world to watch over them. But on the night of their 7th birthday, despite the deception, the entity's power proved unfathomably precise. At 2:58 a.m., sensors detected a simultaneous drop in temperature in both rooms. Both twins sat up and whispered in eerie silence. Then, at exactly 3:00 a.m., a blackout crippled all monitoring equipment. When power returned, Lily, the true firstborn, was found lifeless. Face down, arms outstretched, eyes frozen in horror. Michael remained untouched. This devastating event confirmed what many feared: the entity cannot be fooled. It sees beyond names, records, even human belief. The curse is biological, metaphysical, and relentless. And it will always collect what it's owed. Samuel Corbyns' death in 2024 shattered the family's last hope for loopholes in the curse. Unlike his ancestors, Samuel's countdown did not begin at his birth, but at a near-death experience as an infant. At just 6 months old, he suffered severe pneumonia and was clinically dead for 3 minutes before doctors miraculously revived him. But the entity that stalks the Corbyns bloodline doesn't measure time by birthdays. It measures from the moment life almost slipped away. Exactly 7 years later, at 2:58 a.m. on February 3, 2024, the new moon closest to that critical event, the cameras recorded chilling anomalies, a sudden temperature drop, electronic interference, and a shadow moving against light itself. When power returned, Samuel was found lifeless. Face down, arms, outstretched, eyes wide with ancient terror. This horrifying shift revealed the entity's adaptability, proving it counts time not from birth, but from the first brush with death. The curse isn't just persistent, it's evolving. And the family's desperate race against time just grew even more impossible. Dr. Eleanor Klein, a quantum physicist drawn to the Corbyns mystery, proposed a chilling theory: quantum predation. She suggests the entity isn't supernatural in the traditional sense, it exists in quantum states beyond human perception, feeding on the collapse of infinite potential futures into one unavoidable reality: death. According to Klein, a 7-year-old child represents a critical nexus, where countless possible futures narrow into a single outcome. The entity consumes this moment, the final quantum choice, snatching life with merciless precision. All previous attempts to shield the Corbyns, whether scientific, spiritual, or deceptive, have failed because they don't account for this quantum reality. The next expected victim is 7-year-old William Corbyn, whose birthday falls on Halloween 2025, coinciding with a new moon, an astronomical alignment Klein believes intensifies the entity's power. Despite modern science and desperate human will, the curse marches forward, challenging our understanding of fate, free will, and the unseen forces that bind us. The question remains, can quantum physics offer salvation or only deepen the nightmare? The Corbyn curse reminds us that some mysteries defy explanation and challenge the limits of human understanding, forcing us to confront uncomfortable truths about fate, free will, and the unseen forces that shape our lives. While science advances and theories evolve, the legacy of the Corbyn family remains a chilling testament to the unknown. What do you believe lies at the heart of this dark saga? Ancient supernatural forces, quantum phenomena, or something beyond our grasp? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story gave you chills, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell to never miss our deep dives into history's darkest mysteries. Your engagement helps us bring more captivating tales straight to you. So act now and be part of the journey into the shadows.